Okay, welcome back everyone to the flagship event for CHI Innovate 2022. Sorry to break up your conversations. I know it's been a long time since you all come together and surely many things to catch up on. And I promise you that the discussion and this particular segment will be engaging enough for you all to listen. My name is Heng. I'm the Executive Director for CHI, and it's my great pleasure to welcome all of you to our event, our auditorium here. And I will be your host for this particular segment, which is Scaling Impact. And of course, you will have 2 more sessions after lunch this afternoon. And if you already know, as you might already know by now, CHI Innovate this year is themed the road from innovation to impact. And for those of you who are familiar with CHI, you will know that we are constantly redesigning and reimagining the care that we provide to our patients. Now, the innovation journey can be challenging, but it's nowhere as tough as making innovation stick. As we look to bring about a positive impact for tomorrow's healthcare, the scientific committee of this year's conference has very aptly designed today's program into 3 fascinating conversations: Scaling Impact, as I mentioned, and the afternoon ones are Redefining Impact and Mobilising for Impact. Now, before we commence with our speaker and our panel discussion, let's all get warmed up with an icebreaker activity. Don't worry, nothing too physical. But in a brief 20 seconds, I would like to invite all of you to introduce yourself to your neighbor. Hopefully you're not seated alone, and if you are, maybe just stretch out a little bit more. Share briefly about where you're from. Okay, thank you. Thank you very much. Sorry I have to break your conversations up again. I think I kind of regret inviting you to speak to one another. Right now, for the icebreaker activity, I would like you to think of a project that addresses a pain point that keeps you up at night. Okay, I repeat myself once everyone has settled down. I would like you to think of a project that addresses a pain point that keeps you up at night. You are highly, well, maybe I shouldn't encourage too much, but you've got 1 minute, discuss with your neighbor if you want to, and next we will get you to write down your project in mind over your mobile phone using the QR code. But go ahead, you have 1 minute to think about a project that addresses a pain point that keeps you up at night. And for those who are a little bit quicker, you can scan the QR code and key in your responses. Okay, I see that many of you have whipped out your phones, and probably there are many responses. Can we take a quick look at the Padlet and see where we are in terms of responses? Now, in case you're wondering, the purpose of this exercise is so that you can better relate some of the takeaways from each of the segments from today's conference to the project that you have in mind. And here we are seeing quite a number already on the screen. Don't worry, CHI is not going to take your ideas and run away. Right? This is really for your own self-learning and engagement. Now that we are all warmed up, let me kick off the first segment for today. Scaling Impact. Many questions we have in mind. Why do most innovations fail to spread? Why do they succeed? What are the lessons drawn from the startup industry that we can apply to larger organizations, including the ones that we work in today? Now, to answer this, I'm very pleased to invite our keen CentreStage speaker, Mikey Doyer. She's a professor at various universities, has an MBA, is a mentor for several startup accelerators, all this while leading Epic Angels, the female-only investment network in Asia Pacific. So ladies and gentlemen, let's put our hands together for Mikey Doyer.
Thank you. Indeed, the topic for today, scaling impact, scaling innovation. How are we going to do that? And I'm glad you pronounced my name, Mikey. It's always that first question that everyone is asking, how do I pronounce your name? It always happens everywhere. But Mikey, Micah, you can call me whatever you like. There's only one country in the world where I think they know immediately how to pronounce my name properly. That's in this country, that's the Netherlands. That's the country where I'm born, so that's where my name is coming from. And when I was a little kid, the thing I loved most in school was math. Okay, it might be a little bit weird, but I really, really love numbers. So I studied math, and I ended up in a corporate career. I was going to Arthur Andersen back in the day. That says something about my age, right, if I put Arthur Andersen up. At Deloitte, PricewaterhouseCoopers. I was in mergers and acquisitions, and I loved my job. And what I was doing, I was working with all these corporates, writing beautiful business plans. Consultants are really good in writing business plans. But what I realized was these business plans end up gathering dust in the office of a CEO. What is really happening? Where is that impact? So I felt a bit more of a rebel, like how can we do this different? Because clearly writing business plans is not changing the world. So what can we do? So instead, together with another colleague from PricewaterhouseCoopers, we started another company called Business Models Inc. and we produced the book Business Model Generation, the Business Model Canvas book. Can I see some hands who has heard of the Business Model Canvas? Ah, good to see. That's good. About half or so. Nice, right? So we produced the book and we launched that. So I'm good to see that you're all using that. And I was doing that in the Netherlands, but quickly realized if I want to scale, if I want to grow bigger as an organization, I need to go to the United States. So I jumped on a plane, took my husband with me. He was good enough to quit his job for me. We went together to San Francisco, and I started the company there as well. So in San Francisco and later on in New York. And what I did there, I helped corporates and startups to innovate, how to do that. So that was a very exciting time. And about 2 years ago, I did an exit from my company. You know, there's always time for a change. And I decided to move to Singapore. I landed here September 2020. I thought that was the end of the pandemic. Turned out to be the beginning, little did we know. So 2 years ago, I came here. So I live here now in Singapore, where I also keep on helping both corporates and startups. How can we do innovation? How can we do that in a different way? And I do that with a couple of different organizations. So SMU, I'm a prof there where I teach the kids about entrepreneurship, how to do that. At Design Singapore Council, where I'm on the advisory boards. And Epic Angels, as was already mentioned. And so we are an investment network existing out of only female investors, and we are investing in startups, so that's a pretty nice thing to do as well. So that gives you a little bit about my background, where I'm coming from. So what are we going to do today? Scaling innovation, scaling impact. How can we do that? Because we all see that the world around us is changing, and business as usual is dead, right? We see a lot of companies crumbling. Like, what can we do? Because that gives all that uncertainty. We feel very uncomfortable. Like, what's going to happen? I mean, right now, look at the stock exchange prices. It's a nightmare. What's going to happen? What's next year going to look like? So what do we tend to do? We're like, you know what? Let's write a plan. We feel very certain. Let's write this up in a nice business plan, spend some good time with our colleagues. But maybe this is the best news of today. Please stop writing business plans. It is absolutely useless. I have never ever seen a business plan surviving the first customer contact. Never ever. It also never turns out to be true. Because, you probably recognize this scenario. What happens is you have a meeting, you have a certain idea, and you start to write your plan, feel very good. Good progress, finally deliver the plan, have more meetings, of course, about the plan, keep on changing, and then finally, after a while, we launch it like, yes, right, this is our next big thing that we're going to do, to figure out it was a big failure. Recognize this? Happened before? So what can we do next, right? What is it that we can change? Because we're so used to that and we feel so comfortable writing plans, but we need to do things in a different way. We have to think like a designer. That is critical here. So what do we mean, have to think like a designer? There are many different types of designers out there. Think about a fashion designer, or think about an architect. What do they have in common, these traditional designers? How do they work? Well, they're not spending their time in meetings. They're actually out there, they're looking on the streets, what is someone wearing, what are the trends, what do people feel comfortable in. They make fast sketches. If you've ever worked with an architect, he will never show you one drawing. They will show you multiple drawings of that building that they're working on. And they give you options. They do quick mock-ups as well. That's amazing. Why don't we do that in business? I always keep on wondering about that. And so for me, that is the essence of this whole design thinking. How can we do that difference? And to put that in a bit of a definition, like what is design thinking? It's this human-centered, collaborative approach to problem solving that's creative, iterative, and practical. So it's human-centered. Customer is at the heart. It's collaborative. You can't do this on your own behind your laptop. No way. It's about solving a problem, not about coming up with a solution. It really is about focusing in on the problem in a creative, iterative, and practical way. Or another way to say that, it's about an integration of the customer desirability, business viability, and technical feasibility. For any business that you have, no matter whether it's for-profit, not-for-profit, whatever industry you're in, small, big, this needs to work, this needs to be integrated. What usually happens? We start with technical feasibility. We spend years in R&D figuring out to find that problem. But in design thinking, we turn this around. We're all like, let's start with the customer. Let's first figure out, does the customer want this? I've spent time with really large corporates that spend years on developing this product, finally ready for the launch, and then they called me like, hey, can you help me out with the business model? We're now ready for launch. Killed the project in 1 or 2 months because we just learned there's no customer that wanted it. So they spent all this money and all this time in the R&D lab for nothing. And so we really need to change that around. So we need to switch on our brain, and we need to wire our brain in a little different way. And we need to start with, who is our customer? What I've learned over the years, most companies have absolutely no clue who their customer is. Let me ask you a question. Who has spoken with a patient this week? A patient not about the medical cause. Raise your hand. 1, 2, 3, 4. What is that, 1% of the audience here? I'm speaking with an actual patient. We sort of tend to forget that because if we're talking about healthcare, the patient is at the center. And a lot of us interact with the patient for the medical cause, but how can we interact in this very different way? We need to understand who that customer is, and we gather all this data. I've learned in Singapore you love doing surveys, right? So you gather all this information, all this data. We still have no clue, right? So that is not enough. And then we focus in on the solution, but we skip what really matters. We need to fall in love with the problem. What is the key thing here that we're trying to solve? Because if we focus in on the problem, coming up with solutions all the time becomes easy, because the problem usually stays, but the solutions can vary over time. And because customers are not looking for products, they have a problem and they want to fix that problem, and that's what they want to buy for you. And so let me give you an example about that. If, for example, you say, I'm in textbooks. And so I'm this publisher, and my customers want these books, so I publish these books. And okay, your market is these textbooks. But if you change that around and really focus on what is the problem that I'm trying to solve, what is the job to be done, as we like to call it, this person is a student. They want to learn something. Today, they might be using textbooks, yes. But what do they want to use tomorrow? What is that next thing that they want to use? So here you see that if you shift away from the product, shift away from your solution, but focus in on the problem, all of a sudden, there's a wide range of potential solutions that you can come up with. And so that is that mind shift that we're all looking for. To really about scaling impact is about focusing in on the problem, because if the problem is big enough, you'll find more people that need it, which means you can scale your impact. So that's what we need to understand. So this human-centered approach starts off with this customer desirability. I'll give you another example. Wheelchairs. I was speaking with a startup, and what they wanted to do, they wanted to come up with autonomous wheelchairs. And they were working together with a hospital. So like, okay, cool, autonomous is this new thing. We all want autonomous stuff. Autonomous wheelchairs. So I was asking them as well, what's the job to be done of a wheelchair? Well, that's to get customers from A to B. Is it really? That's a very functional job to be done, as I like to call it. But what's the real thing that we're trying to solve? Because actually, when I landed here in Singapore, as a Dutch person, I like to be on my bicycle. So I did that in Singapore, and then I fell, so I broke my arm. So I broke my arm, got in a car to the hospital. It was literally dripping with blood. It was all open. I got out of the car in front of the hospital, and then there was this nurse with a wheelchair running over to me, put me in the wheelchair to guide me into the hospital. So what was the job to be done there? Was that to get me from A to B? No, because there was nothing wrong with my legs. I broke my arm. Right? But it was the emotional job to be done. I was so happy that this nurse was there. She was taking care of me. She was comforting me because I was in this new country in Singapore. I had no clue yet about the whole healthcare system in this country. And this lady made me feel comfortable. I was like, okay, good. She's going to take care of me no matter what. So if that had been an autonomous wheelchair, would not have been a good experience, right? So we really, when we do this, we really need to look beyond the functional job to be done, but also look at the emotional job to be done. What is it that someone is looking for? Or look at the starting point of the customer journey. When do you start with your product? When does your customer start? This was another company I was working for. They do these car seats, these baby car seats. Okay, when does someone buy a car seat like this? When they buy the car seats, that was what the company was saying. You know, when they're pregnant, they're about 3 months before delivery. That's probably the moment when they start to think, okay, I need to bring the baby back home from the hospital. I need to have a car seat. Well, is that really where the customer journey starts? It starts 6 months before that. Right? It starts 6 months before when you do that clear blue test. And you're like, oh, I'm pregnant. That's already when that whole journey starts for this mom. So you really need to figure out, can I already get into the customer journey way before the moment of the purchase of the car seat? Because of course they're not thinking about a car seat when they just realize they're pregnant. But can you already get into the customer journey and really be part of that by the time they buy the car seat, you're top of mind because you actually added value all over. Or this one, the Henry Ford Hospital. I don't know if you're familiar with this example. I think this is amazing. How they, about a decade ago, they hired a new CEO, Gerard van Ginsven, sorry, Dutch name, he was working at the Ritz-Carlton. And they hired him as their new CEO to come to this hospital. He wasn't from healthcare at all. He was from hospitality. So what he did was really trying to understand, who is the community here? Who lives around my hospital? Who are my customers, my patients? And I don't want to talk about sick care. I really want to talk about healthcare. What can we do in terms of prevention? So he went out, not in the hospital, he went outside. He went to people's houses. He had conversations there. He tried to understand, how do these people live in this community? He even spent the night at some of the patients living around that hospital to really learn. And already within the first months that he was in charge, he was able to bring customer satisfaction up to 99%. And even the number of nights that someone stays in the hospital, reduced that with 1 night. And that is an amazing result, and that is an impact. Just because he was focusing in on the customer and really trying to understand what it was done. So this also means that we need to learn. And that means, well, first of all, that means that we need to get out of the building. We actually need to get out there. And I see that some of the videos do work good. And we need to walk out, get out of the building. Don't spend the time behind our laptop, but really trying to understand who is our customer. And if we do that, we also need to see innovation. It's not a checkbox. It's not a single task that we're doing. It's about culture. And if you think about culture, culture is a muscle memory. Culture is about the past. not about the future. So if you want to change the future, you need to change a couple of things in your organization, because it's all about that muscle memory that you need to get. And I love this quote by Richard Branson, right? That you don't learn to walk by following the rules, you learn by doing and by falling over. And I think that that is something that we need to keep in mind, and we need to allow people to do that. We need to allow people to fail. But then the other question we can ask ourselves, what is actually innovation? For me, innovation is all about creating new value. It's basically an idea that's transformed into reality. So that can be all different kind of things that you're working on. And this is a traditional way of thinking about innovation. You have three categories: core innovation, adjacent, and transformational. I'm expecting that most of you have seen something like this. So the core, all about what you do right now. Adjacent, it's new to you, but not really new to the industry. Transformational is new to everyone. And those are those big hotshot ideas. Some people speak about Horizon 1, Horizon 2, Horizon 3, many frameworks out there. But what's very interesting to look at, because we all want this transformational innovation, that's that impact that we really want to make. But where's the issue? That's in the success rate. Core innovation, success rate is about 95%. Basically everything we pick up, probably gonna succeed. Adjacent, 50-50. Transformational, only 20% of what we come up with will succeed. That means 80% is failing. And that is a mindset shift that we need to have. That means we need to dare to do this. This also means if 20% only succeeds, so if we set up 10 projects, only 2 will succeed, 8 will fail. And that is something that we need to accept. Otherwise, we can never get into transformational innovation, can never get into the impact. And it's very uncomfortable because it's this search moment that you're in. You need to go through all these weird hoops and fail and discover, oh, that did not work. Maybe that did work. That is what you really need to focus in on, instead of core innovation, which feels very comfortable. And that also means you need to look into your organization. Again, as we said, innovation is not a task. It's not a department. It really should be part of the culture of everyone in the organization. So you need to think about, what's my innovation DNA in my organization? It is like an ecosystem. You cannot only do one thing and then the rest don't do it. I mean, here you see it as well. In the middle, it's about your ambition. What do you want to achieve with innovation? What's that point of view? Where do you want to get to? If you look into the organization, is it just project by project? Or is it really big how you're going to do that? What about the metrics? Most of us immediately go to metrics that are focused on the end game. They want to like profitability or the other regular metrics that we're looking into, but that doesn't work in transformation, and definitely not early stage. That's not a metric you can live by, because we saw already only 20% will succeed, 80% will fail. So you need to think in a complete different way and get everyone in the organization involved and really see this as an ecosystem on how you can get that done. So again, switch on that brain, wire that brain in a different way, and dare to fail. Fail early, fail fast, and fail often. Because the key word here for me is not fail. The key word is early, fast, and often. Because what I hear a lot, especially in healthcare, is, yeah, in our industry this doesn't work. You know, lives are at stake, and we have regulation, we can't do that. I hear that all the time. That's not true. Right? There's always a way how you can get around that, as long as you do it early, fast, and often. That is really the critical thing, because indeed, if you work 2 years on something and you put people's life at stake, that's not a fail that we want to get into, but there are many other things that you can do up front. Because failing, again, it's not about not succeeding, it's about learning. And we constantly need to learn from what happens. Hey, that didn't work as we expected. Okay, good. What did we learn? And the good news is, especially in the healthcare business, you are used to this. You do this all the time. If you look at coming up with new medication, with new drugs, I mean, how many things do not work? The majority does not work. You've all seen that in these R&D processes. So we also need to do that on our business side. We need to apply the same methodology. Like, hey, what are the things that do not work? Great, that's success. We learned something. Now we can focus on the other methodologies that might work. We can exclude something. It's just like doing that whole bioscience thing. And so it's about thinking big, have that bigger vision, but start small so that you can learn very, very fast. Because that's the other thing. There's an illness you might not have heard of, but that's an illness in innovation. It's called featureitis. Because that's the other thing where we all struggle from. When we finally come up with that idea, we're like, no, we cannot launch this yet because we first need to add this feature, that feature. No, we all suffer from that. I mean, I even had it yesterday with my colleague. We're launching a new product as well. She's like, no, that's not launched yet. Let's add that first. I said, no, that's going to take another month. I want to launch now, and I'm going to add that feature a month from now. That's totally fine. It doesn't have to be perfect yet, but we have to launch. And this is the quote that I really love. If you're not embarrassed by your first product launch, you've launched too late. This is the Silicon Valley mindset. And this is what I continuously saw when I was living there. I mean, I often had people over from Europe that were visiting all the startups, and then they said like, I'm a little underwhelmed when I saw the factory and when I saw the quality. I was like, yeah, that's nice, but you've been spending all these years in R&D, you haven't launched yet. How many customers do they already have? 100,000. How many did you have? 5? Okay, your product might be better quality, but you don't know yet because you've only tested with 5. They already tested with 100,000 customers right now, and they're launching. They're getting the market share. They're going to conquer the market, not you, focusing in on the quality. Yes, you need to continuously improve, and they know that. They know it's not perfect yet, but they will improve based on customer feedback instead of just an opinion from someone sitting behind a laptop. So that's the key thing here to do. Another example here. Anyone ever bought shoes at Zappos? I love it. It's a good site. You can buy shoes online. When they launched, everyone said, no one is going to buy shoes online. Who will ever do that? So what did they do as their first product launch? Because think about that. What do you need to set up an online shop for shoes, right? You need to get all the shoes. You need to get the warehousing, all the logistics in place. They're like, no. Let's do this easy. So what did they do? They just got a quick website up. That's easy. They went in the mall close to their office to a shoe store. Took pictures of shoes that were in the shoe shop. Perfect. Put those pictures up on their website. Whenever an order came in, they quickly ran to the shoe store, bought those shoes, shipped them off to the clients. Perfect, right? It works. Client doesn't know that the back end is just nothing yet. We call that the Wizard of Oz. It's like the front looks really beautiful and the back nothing works yet. But it works. Super cheap. You get to know immediately who is actually my customer, what type of shoes do they like, how does it work logistic-wise, and then, of course, slowly you start to build your back end as well, based on real customer feedback. How could you do that in healthcare? Well, this is an example where they were building a new hospital. So they rented a large warehouse, and before building the actual hospital, they built it at scale using cardboard. Super fast, super cheap. And they actually went through with beds and everything, because I don't know if you're in a hospital working, you probably noticed that, like, that didn't work, that was bad design. On airports, it's the same, right? When you're with your suitcase, you have to go to the bathroom, and then with the doors, it just never works. Like, I wish they've done something like that. And so you can always come up with this early stage prototype that you can use, because this will help you to fail fast and to really figure out what works and what does not work. So what's next for you? If you really want to scale innovation, go big or go home. Dare to go into the transformation. Really dare to go into innovation beyond core, beyond adjacent, and really focus in on the total innovation system of your organization. Do this together. It starts with a very strong vision of everyone involved. And when I say do this together, again, innovation is not a department. Innovation is something where you need the whole organization, the board of directors, management, you need doctors, nurses, and don't forget the lady at the reception. I mean, I've been working with hospitals where we've been working on new business models. And we were in a room sitting with the board, with doctors, with nurses, and the lady up behind the reception. And guess who came up with the most brilliant idea? The lady at the reception. And why was that? Because she actually speaks with the customer. not about the medical cost, but she really understands who this is. So make sure you involve everyone throughout your organization. Fill early, fill fast, and fill often. And if you want to allow yourself to fill early, fill fast, and fill often, you have to have multiple ideas. You cannot work on just one project, because as we said, especially if you want to do these big impact ones, 80% will fail. So you cannot have one project, because that's a disaster if that would fail. But if you have multiple, then it's okay if a couple of them don't work. You knew that because you have the whole portfolio. You still have a couple left, because you have to kill your darlings in this process. That's another key thing that you really need to do. Do you all think about that one project that is lingering and lingering and lingering? It pops up every year and still nothing is happening. We all know those things, but we have to be able to say, no, we stop this now. And if you don't want to kill it, I say, let's put it at least in the fridge or in the freezer, right? Then we keep it fresh, but we don't touch it anymore right now. Get rid of it and focus on the ones where you get traction and see some customer interaction happening. So think big, start small, and learn fast with that. And of course, get to know your customer. Get to know your customer beyond functional, and really make sure every time functional jobs to be done, yes, I get that, but what are those emotional jobs to be done? No surveys, okay? Stop doing surveys. Instead, get out there. I mean, just go out there. Even in healthcare is the easiest place to really get to know your customer. Go to a hospital, just sit there at the entrance for an hour. Just watch, just observe, see what's happening. Go into a waiting room. Just really look at a 2-year-old kid that's super curious and wants to know everything and sees everything for the first time. What is really happening? You will learn so much more from a 1 hour doing that instead of doing a survey, I really guarantee you. Because in the end, if you're sitting in a room with a bunch of slide decks, there's very little that can go wrong. There's just very little that can go right too. So I'm looking forward to see all your new healthcare transformational innovations coming alive. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And I better get this pronunciation right, because we're going to have Micah sit here for the next at least 90 minutes. So Micah, can I invite you down to sit down here on, well, whatever is a stage. And for a fireside chat, we're going to have a 10-minute kind of question and answer. I know many of you may already have questions on your mind, so go ahead and start posting your questions using the QR code. And there's plenty of time for us to ask questions later on. Come, Micah. Right, so very, very excellent lecture. I think there's a lot of relevance to what we have been doing in our various organizations in healthcare. And today among the audience are not just the attendees from the hospitals, but also very much from the intermediate and long-term care sectors, the primary care, so essentially really across the healthcare sector. So thank you. I think there are many generic points that we can take back from your sharing, and some of them struck me particularly. One of them is really about stop business plans. Stop business plans means when I go to my chief financial officer and I ask for some grants, he'll say, you don't have a plan, right? How can I endorse and provide you funding for your project? What would you say to that? If I'm your CFO, what would you tell me?
Now startups tell me the same thing. It's like, oh yeah, nice not having a business plan, but then I need to go to the investor, and then the investor still wants to see the business plan. And so I get that. I've also been working in banks. Banks is a bit of the same. And what we've done there is, when we talk, again, innovation is a system. It's not part for one person. We have to get that person involved as well if we speak about innovation. What does that really mean? What are the type of projects where we can say, you know what, this is our budget that we're going to do, and for these type of budgets, you actually don't need permission. The other thing that I feel we can do, because, I mean, actually, the thing that I didn't even tell, I was a CFO at Business Models Inc., so I'm a true number person, so the show me the money part is very important. But the other part here is what we said is fail early, fail fast. So you shouldn't go up there for a budget for a full project because you don't know yet. You should only be able to get up there for the first 3 months. Like, okay, I need a budget for the first 3 months. This is roughly what which means it's going to be a super tiny budget. Another thing that we've been doing at organizations is having stage gates, like 3-month stage gates, never more than 3 months, honestly, because then it's going to be way too long. And then we knew, okay, if it's phase 1, this is the budget. That's sort of a fixed budget. If you stay below that, you don't even need to ask for permission. You can just go ahead. Phase 2, probably a little bigger budget. And so we need to see a couple of KPIs, not profitability KPIs yet. That's not where we are. Early stage KPIs that we need to come up with. And if you hit those KPIs, yes, this can be your budget. So I think it's a different way of thinking involving the whole system.
Thank you, thank you. I think there's some parallels in the startup ecosystem where you have different series type funding. And maybe we could think about that as we think about trying to finance or to provision for the innovation projects that we are embarking on. Excellent. I guess the other question that struck me was this thing about surveys, and I'm so embarrassed. I had a colleague of mine share with me a prototype, and I said, yeah, I think we should survey the patients to understand what they thought about it. And this was really a digital kind of a synthetic media where we had like using AI to speak to in a video. And I don't know. I guess from where the traditional view is that if I don't do a survey, I don't know what the person's perception is, and therefore I may not be able to design the solution that meets their needs. What is your response to that?
You need to interact with the customer, that's critical, just not through surveys. I mean, it's the same with my students as well. The surveys is the forbidden word. Only in the last 2 weeks, they are allowed to add more responses through surveys, but the first weeks, the only thing they're allowed to do is get out of the building. And I always tell them, I don't want to see you in my class if you haven't spoken to at least 10 customers this week. And it really is about getting out there, and it's super uncomfortable in the beginning. But what is the problem with surveys, especially early stage? I mean, later on, it's all fine, you can do surveys. But for new ideas, for innovation specifically, don't do it, because the survey you create, the questions you ask, are based on your own assumptions. But you don't know what you don't know. And you can only ask questions based upon what you do know. And that's where the biggest issue is. Usually what happens, you write down your questions, you get out, you start your first question, you get an answer back that you absolutely did not expect. You throw away your questions, and you actually start a conversation with the person. And that's where you learn. So the next time you do the interaction, you have different questions because you learned something from the first conversation. And you can't do that with a survey. So that's why I'm saying,
I see.
No, later on, all fine, right? That's all good, but definitely not in the beginning.
Thank you, thank you. That's very useful. I think most of us think that we go into surveys wanting to know, but even before we started asking, we already inserted some of the filters that we think need to be in place, and therefore maybe just going to the customer with and in our case patients with an open mind and very open-ended way of engaging with them. So thanks, and you will probably also note that the majority of our audience today are working in fairly large organizations. Most of us are employees of the organizations. I think the most, if not all of us, are not thinking that we want to be a startup founder. Oh, some of us might be thinking about wanting to be a startup founder, but I think for many of us, the reason why we're here today is because we all believe that we want to be a part of the whole innovation journey. And I think the challenge for us perhaps is to try and understand, the startup ecosystem that looks so exciting, so vibrant, and then when we get back to our organizations, everything is so structured and organized. How could you draw some parallels in terms of trying to bring out the culture of innovation that you talked about, similar to what the startup ecosystem is in organizations where things tend to be more structured? How can we develop that culture of innovation amongst us?
Yeah, it's also the difference between search and execute. Because if you look at a corporate, at a large organization, the key thing you need to do in a large organization is execution, right? That has to be the focus. Execution, you basically know if I do A, this is going to be the result, because you've done it before. In a startup or in innovation, when you do A, you have no clue what the outcome will be. And sometimes you can start on a Monday and on a Friday be like, oh my goodness, I'm now actually thrown a month back. Nothing really happened here. And that's the uncertainty that comes with the search for something new. And the difference between execution and search is quite a big difference in mindset and way of working. And many people struggling combining that. Even for myself, if sometimes I'm really in an execution mode, and then I can't just sit apart and think like, oh, what is the next thing that I'm gonna do? It doesn't work because your brain is an execution mindset. So also innovation, I mean, some people you can just pull out and involve, but if innovation is your key task, make sure you do that properly. Make sure you spend time on it. I mean, I saw it with some large corporates as well. Yeah, we're going to do this project and we're going to get 20 people on the project. It's like 20 people. I mean, that's way too many. That means every week we're having meetings, just updating each other, but we didn't do anything because everyone is only spending 2 hours a week on this project. That doesn't lead to anything. I'd rather have 2 full-timers, 100% on it, that maybe once a month update the rest of the group, that's fine, or involve them or get their input in. But it has to be dedicated because execution and search are so different and it's so difficult to combine that in a day.
Thank you, thank you. I guess it needs to be very deliberate, very intentional by the organization, from the leadership, as well as of course from all of us practitioners on the ground. And obviously one of the challenges, and we have time today, the rest of the day as well, to think about how you will mobilize for impact and redefine impact. So I'll reserve some of that conversation for later on in the day, but obviously one of the big things that I just want to bring out on the table is about time, right? So we talked about making sure that there are dedicated people and the whole thinking about search. But really, I think one of the biggest challenge for all innovators out here is I don't have enough time. I'm so busy with the execution of my clinical services. So we'll park that thought for now. And if any of you have any thinking behind that or comments, you're free to post that and share with everyone as well later on. And so we've come to the end of the fireside chat. Thank you, Micah, very much for openly sharing, and we will hear more from you as well as we conduct the panel discussion. Thank you. Can we give her another round of applause? All right, so let me now call upon our 3 innovators, and they come from different parts of the world in terms of their experiences. So from Singapore, US, and across Asia Pacific. So first up, we have Dr. Suen To, who is currently the CEO and co-founder of medical director of Novi Healthcare. Dr. Brian Tan, who is the Chief Health Officer of Salesforce APAC, and Mr. Julian Khoo, who is CEO and co-founder of Jagami. So thank you very much to the 3 of you for being here. Welcome. All of you are innovators, in one way or other. And before we commence, are you comfortable, all 3, on that? I feel like I'm taking up so much space over here. Are you good? Yeah, all right, sure. All good for the camera as well? You can catch them all in one view? Yeah, okay, great. Right, so we're going to be hearing about your personal experiences first, right? So each of our panelists are going to be sharing in a couple minutes about their innovation journey and their views about innovation, and then we'll kick off with the panel discussion proper. So Suen, let us start with you.
Thank you so much for having me here. It's always a pleasure to join CHI and be a friend of CHI. I've always been very impressed with the team and the work that you continue to do. I think before I elaborate on the scaling journey that I've been on, I don't have slides, but I think what Mikey shared with the illustrative examples in a relatively short time was incredible, and I think sets the stage up perfectly. I think all I can hope to do is share some personal experiences that I've been through together with my incredible team on this journey that perhaps lend a little bit more color to some of the principles that Mikey has already outlined, which I think are really spot on. One of the aspects, I think, is in the word innovation itself, which is in CHI's name, and also obviously the theme of why we're all here today. Novi Health, Novi actually is Latin for new, and actually we started it because we thought there really needed to be new ways of looking at health for individuals, for providers, for the broader ecosystem. And I completely agree with Mikey that innovation to us is creating new value. It's not doing something, not creating something new for the sake of newness, but really asking ourselves, what value can we really add to each stakeholder, right? So we started Novi Health, or I embarked on this journey really for 2 to 3 reasons. One is being faced with the problem day in, day out as an endocrinologist. I deal a lot with metabolic health, right? So diabetes being one of the core conditions, but really high blood pressure, cholesterol, weight, and in this part of the world, it's not just about obesity per se, but Asians tend to develop complications associated with essentially putting fat in the wrong places, such that we develop things like diabetes, heart disease, strokes, even certain types of cancers at a much lower set point. And that's a huge problem because that obviously lends to the burden of chronic diseases, and an aging population. We get good at increasing lifespan, but we have to ask ourselves, how are we going to increase health span? And that was a problem that I was seeing day in, day out as a clinician, as a researcher, when I was practicing at the National University Hospital, the health system, and a university. So I dedicated a lot of my time to unraveling that problem, and then realized that when we, as Mikey said, interact with our customers, our patients, I realized, look, even if the research we get breakthroughs, which we do, at best, some of these get translated, sometimes 5 years, 10 years. And I'm very impatient by nature. I think when I made that transition, or decided to make that transition out, I had to meet someone very senior in the Ministry of Health, and in the best way possible, I'm very, very grateful for the pearls of wisdom that I got in that short session. That day, I recall there was somewhat of a mini crisis occurring, and this person still took the time to meet with me, did not cancel the meeting that was set up. And this person asked, why do you feel you need to do what you need to do by moving out of the system? Why can't you stay in the system and fix the problem? Why is it so difficult, right? Then he listened to me for about 1 minute, and he said, okay, I get it. How can we help? Okay, and this same person, I remember once on the multiple presentations I've had, I used to be with the Regional Health System Office, so all of you, I'm sure, are also familiar with population health, health ESG, etc. This was maybe like 4 or 5 years ago, where all this was a lot more nascent. So I was very much accustomed to doing a lot of these presentations, plans, etc. And at the end of the presentation, I highlighted some of the progress we've made, but also the challenges and some potential solutions. And they said, why isn't this happening? And I said, well, maybe everyone's trying their best, but I'm just very impatient by nature. And this person said, you started the presentation with patience, and you ended the presentation with being very impatient. So I think you asked why. In part, it is that sense of, oh, this problem, and having that calling or a burden of that purpose that we have a role to play in solving this problem, and sometimes it means leaving your comfort zone and taking a crack at it from a different vantage point. And last, but certainly not least, and the most important point would be people. Okay, I had the privilege of working with incredibly talented people, and at that point, I also had a few team members, etc., who, for whatever their personal reasons were were looking to move on and transition to other roles. And I thought, what a waste that would be for healthcare. And so I guess in part one thing led to another, and we got together and co-founded Novi Health. Okay, so what exactly do we do? I think there's no better way to tell it than from a user's perspective. So I think there's just a very short video telling it from one of our users who felt so passionately about what he experienced. He was a very quiet person, but he actually said, "Can I tell my story?" And this is his story. And then I think I'll just wrap up after this video with highlighting certain components based on what he shared about how we are looking to scale this.
9 months later, less than a year, I'm off medication for 3 months. I'm Yong Xiang. I'm basically work in the IT industry. Has been in this industry for about 20 over years. Free time, normally I like to read. In the past, I jogged, but I had some knee issue, and after that, I basically stopped. I love our local Singaporean food. Chicken rice is definitely one of them. Due to the nature of the work, it's very long hours, food is not regular, and maybe I take too much sugar in my drinks and my food, and not enough exercise. Yeah, so that was how was it in the past. Strangely, I noticed that I was losing a lot of weight, right? And my energy level starts to drop. I start to feel very tired. My vision starts to blur. And even my colleague noticed that I was looking very haggard, low energy level. So I went to have my blood test checked at a nearby clinic. And it was realized that my blood sugar level was 12.9, about 2 times over the limit. Right, and that's where I realized that I have diabetes. It came as a shock to me, surprised that because my dad has diabetes, so I sort of controlled my food as well. I went through a period of denial that how could this happen to me? Initially, the local clinic was kind of slow. The next follow-up session was like 2 to 3 months later, which my vision was really blurred. I couldn't quite drive, I can't see far. My wife felt that, look, let's not wait. And I think that was the best decision I made, was not to wait. We called because my wife was right, let's not wait, let's get this quickly checked. We came here, they did the test, and they found that it was not just sugar level that was high. Dr. Tu, she took action and addressed some of these issues with not just medicine for diabetes, but medicine to protect the kidney and the pancreas. You don't just have to address diabetes alone, but you address the impact of diabetes. And she sent me for eye check, and that to make sure that the damages was not done to this part of the organs. I signed up for the lifestyle program. But when I sign up for this program, what it does is that they do a regular monitoring of my sugar level through the sensor, and they're able to read from there. So from there, they make adjustments to my lifestyle. They try to see what type of food causes the sugar level to shoot up. Progressively, I introduce back some of the normal food that I get to enjoy, and because their impact is not so high in terms of the sugar level, I'm able to again enjoy them. Of course, the amount is reduced, but at least I'm still able to enjoy some of my food instead of totally I can't enjoy. So along the way, it's a slow process, and also from there, it's not just also bringing the health down, but also building the muscle mass. So the team slowly guided me along to reach this stage, and he also adjusted the exercise itself based on my feedback from the exercise. And mainly the thing is about increasing the metabolism to help the body break down the sugar faster, more efficiently. 6 months from the point where I detected diabetes to the point where my readings came down from 12.9 to 5.6. And today, for the last 3 months, I'm not taking any medicine. Did my reading just now, 5.9. People are telling me that I'm going to be on medication for a long time. But here I am, about 9 months later, less than a year, I'm off medication for 3 months. With a more healthy body and a more healthy lifestyle, the energy level improves, and I'm able to enjoy more things in life today than I used to be. More personal time with my elder daughter who decides to go walk with me. And along the way, that improves our understanding of each other and quality time really, because I think that is really priceless. Having a positive attitude to the treatment process itself and working along with the team helps to bring my condition down. So I really hope that if people have diabetes, they seek treatment early and they take action in their life to make changes and not fight the process. And I think, like myself, we can bring life back to normal.
I think the time is up, so I'm going to hand over to the next speaker.
Yep. So thanks so much, Suen, for a very personal sharing, and I think we have many questions to ask you later on. But maybe let me break up the intended flow of the panel discussion, because I noticed that my co-moderator, Mikey, already has penned something down. I was trying not to cheat, but I couldn't help but look at the question. So do you have like an immediate question for Suen?
Well, the key thing for me was that you said, like, I had to step out of the system. And I was like, oh, that's intriguing, right? And what were you able to do by stepping out of the system that you were not able to do by staying in the system?
You had a slide about, right, the core, the adjacent, and then the transformational. So maybe I'll borrow your framework and explain that. I think within the system, we're usually very comfortable with doing core and then some incremental adjacent, because we're a big system, and that's actually sometimes necessary to ensure safety, continuity, etc. And I'm not saying the system doesn't work or is a failure by any means, right? Think about it like a huge tanker ship, okay? You have a roadmap-ish of where you want to go, this island there, but you're a huge tanker ship, and there's so many people involved in driving the direction of this tanker ship that you have to keep in mind and move. So it's going to be a bit slower. And so maybe it's not that, it's me. Like I said, I'm very impatient. So we thought, okay, look, we see this island there that could be better, right? That could actually help all of us. So we're going to go off in a speedboat and try to map out the milestones, annotate the map a little bit better, and we hope to share that back with the tanker ship and hopefully get everyone to the same space or discover more islands together, but contribute to that journey.
Thank you, Suen. And I think some of that also resonates with what Mikey shared earlier about phasing it. So I'm constantly thinking, I don't think we want everybody to step out of the public system like Suen has done. So something that we can think about in our own organizations about de-risking, but perhaps more from the perspective of not wanting the full business plan, but asking for staged plans. Okay, and let's move on now to our second speaker, who is Brian. Brian actually has an interesting career. He's currently, of course, the Chief Medical Officer of Salesforce APAC. And before this, quite a lot of experience with clinical decision support databases, the EMR of Queensland in Australia, strategy consultant in McKinsey, done some work with pharma in Roche, and of course, high up on our minds right now is the EMR, the Epic, and NG-EMR. But of course, today we will focus on your role and how you see that contributing to innovation in healthcare. Yeah, Brian, please.
Okay, thanks so much, Hing. And I better watch myself. Maker is preparing some tough questions, I see. Thank you, everyone. Thank you to Eugene and Hong Tim for inviting Salesforce to participate in this innovation conference. I am Australian by citizenship, but Singapore by birth. So I feel like it's home ground here. I was born in a Peranakan family, part Peranakan, part Hainanese. And Maker, you said earlier that you're a semi-quant by nature, and you thought maybe you might be in isolation in this crowd, but I think you forget this is a Singaporean audience, and we're born with an abacus in our hands. I grew up with my grandma's wooden house by the jungle in Woodlands. I'm a Gen Xer, although I don't look that old. And when I present to Western audiences, that they take a guess that I look 16 or 17, but they forget that I have Singaporean genetics and I'm blessed by that. When growing up in Woodlands, my dad also wrote maths textbooks for the MOE. And so, in answer to your question, we're born with Pythons and Pythagoras, basically. It's a pleasure to spend some time with you here today to talk about innovation. And I see the control room has very kindly put up my first slide. I don't want this to be too didactic, however, but I do want to talk about innovation the way Salesforce sees it. And basically, we have to be aware as innovators in the healthcare space that we are on the cusp of a wave of innovation technology that is going to allow us to do things a lot faster and at scale. What I mean by that is that back in the 1990s, the conversation in health tech was largely around administrative workflows, the opportunity to digitize, to optimize, to introduce efficiencies in the admin workflows. And so a lot of the EMR vendors themselves even started by administrative systems. For example, Cerner started out as an administrative system in pathology. Jump forward to the 2000s, and to elevate the US economy out of the GFC, the Obama regime signed the ARA Act, which then invested billions in digitizing their hospitals around the US. And then we saw the rise of digitization of clinical processes through EMRs and EHRs. So in the 2000s, in the early 2000s, the discussion was all about EMRs and EHRs. Jump forward now to the 2020s, where we see the rise of consumerism, and our primary research that we do at Salesforce, around about 16,000 healthcare consumers here and around the world, demonstrates that when we look through the generations, there is an increased uptake of empowerment, a decentralized model of healthcare, and a move away from that old patriarchal model of medicine that used to be practiced, where it was largely reactive and we would wait for a patient to get acutely unwell before they sought the help of a doctor. Instead now, towards a wave where we're moving towards proactive, predictive models of care. We're using AI in the mix. We're using these predictive algorithms for minimizing sepsis, for identifying patients who might be at risk of deterioration in an acute setting. We're looking for risk prediction algorithms to minimize unplanned hospital readmissions within 24 hours of discharge. That kind of predictive model is largely where we're moving to. And so with that rise of predictivity and consumer centrism, we're seeing in the 2020s the rise of the CRM, which stands for Customer Relationship Management System. Now, a long time ago, over 20 years ago, I started out as the lead author of the MIMS Drug Interactions Database. Are there any doctors and nurses who still use MIMS here? Is it still being used as a textbook? Oh, okay. That's a bit reassuring. And back then, my BDM said, hey, we've got a growing list of customers, doctors, nurses, hospitals, who are using the MIMS database. We need to keep a track of those customers, so let's pull together a CRM. And I said, I'm a doctor, what's a CRM? She said, don't worry, we'll get a subscription for you and a subscription for me, you'll hop online. And what I discovered at that time was a Salesforce CRM that essentially was a drag and drop feature. So I was actually one of Salesforce's first customers back in about 2002 when they first floated on the New York Stock Exchange. And that jump forward 20 years later, that same concept of drag and drop ease of use and a system that's designed with the user in mind is the same philosophy that Salesforce has now. And what it's grown to is a platform for innovation that uses low-code, no-code technology to now allow innovation not to be a Salesforce innovation, but the innovation by doctors, nurses, health IT specialists here and around the world to use as their innovation platform. In Australia, for example, the Department of Health used the platform to create their vaccine distribution system for all non-COVID vaccinations prior to 2020. Now, when COVID hit, they realized what we have is actually a Lego set. We haven't built an app out of the box just for vaccine distribution. We can actually use it for multiple use cases. And so during COVID, they used it as their federal vaccine distribution platform. The New Zealand MOH also saw the same requirement, and prior to COVID, they had built out a bowel cancer screening workflow on the platform. And when COVID hit, they realized they had a Lego set, and they decided to then create workflows for firstly PPE distribution, then contact tracing, and then vaccine distribution, border permit protection. You can start to see that the way of the future is to start with a single use case on an innovation platform and then to rapidly scale by finding other incremental use cases. And before you know it, you've got a population health platform. So in Australia, the platform is also being used by the Department of Health and Aged Care because we have an issue in Australia in the aged care setting with instances of elderly abuse, low culture and morale by aged care workers there. And so as part of their federal reforms, they're using the platform to also architect a provider database for the aged care system. As you can see, there are multiple other use cases that we're prototyping for at the moment in disease surveillance beyond COVID, for vaccines distribution, immunization programs, a child's first 1,000 days, and also a 360 view of Indigenous health as well. I want to show you a screenshot, for example, from the New Zealand experience, where they integrated their scheduling system across the country. And there, they took a distinct consumer-focused experience design process, which is key in innovation. We're not just designing workflows and experiences for doctors and nurses. We have to remind ourselves that at the end of the day, the people they're serving are our patients. And in some cases, citizens who may never actually interact with the hospital system. And so there they took the approach of, well, everyone's actually very busy. We've got kids to drop off at school, we've got shopping runs to run at the supermarket. What are we trying to do when we're booking a vaccine appointment? Well, instead of forcing the users to dive into a nested folder structure of clinic appointment books, what they're saying is let's integrate the entire scheduling system for the entire map of New Zealand, and a user there just indicates whether I want to book an appointment within the next 7 days, the next 14 days, or I'm really busy this month because everyone's birthdays are this month. I'm actually going to book an appointment in a month's time. And there what they've done is highlight on an entire map of New Zealand all of the open clinic appointment slots. So you're not forcing the user to adopt an organization-centric design. You're allowing the user there to access a system which is designed from their own personal experience. And some people are not just booking a vaccine appointment for themselves, they're booking it for their entire family. So they also allow them to book appointment forms that will allow them to fill out that form in quintuplet, potentially if required. The NZMOH found that using this kind of platform, they were able to roll out 5 major projects within the first year of COVID, and then 10 major projects in 2021. And what we're talking about is a sprint cycle then of days and weeks. In Canada, this is the sprint cycle that they adopted for their vaccine rollout. They had 16 sprint cycles to allow them to fail fast within 12 days. That means that by the time you actually roll out your final solution, you've got an iteration design that's gone through potentially 52 different cycles, rather than waiting for your first cycle at the end of 18 to 24 months. For those of us who are nurses and doctors working in the world of EMRs, that just blows our minds, because we're used to rollout cycles of 18 to 24 months, not 18 to 24 days. So I think I'm running out of time, but some other practical examples there of scale is when you use this kind of platform, you can roll out a system that allows 26,000 doses of vaccines to be administered in a single clinic in one day. So in Canada, they opened up the stadium in Toronto, and they administered 26,000 doses within one day on the platform. This is the best organized conference. I get a timer here that indicates the exact time that we have left. So I'm running out of time, and I've got about 8 slides left. But hang around this afternoon. We've got a drinks in the afternoon, so we can dive into a little bit more depth there. We're also designing a well-being dashboard that draws together an understanding that we are not just designing for health. To ultimately impact the outcome of a person, we need to think about their access to housing, their food security, and in Indigenous cultures, their connections to their family members and the land as well. So we need to take a holistic approach to innovation that relies on the platform with, at its heart, a clinical core data model that has concepts there for diagnoses, medications, but it also has concepts there that gives you the full 360-degree view of a person, layer and integration layer, and a workflow Lego set on the top. I'll end there so that I don't dominate the time. Thanks very much.
Thank you. Thanks, Brian, for being a very good Singaporean. I think like I said, we break the kind of original flow of the panel discussion. There might be an immediate question, and maybe, again, I'll get Mikey to kick off that question.
Good, thank you. Indeed, I've been working with Salesforce as well in San Francisco, and what you see is, I think, what you're really good at is bringing these data models in, bringing the tech in to really get to better outcomes. But how do you help the organizations? Because often what I see is then there's a CEO that says, oh, we need to do AI, or, I mean, Salesforce is a sexy tool in a way as well. Oh, we need to get Salesforce, right? And then the tech becomes this shiny object instead of really fixing something. What's your perspective on that?
Innovation is change, and change is culture. Who was it who said culture eats strategy for breakfast, right? And technology is the pillar on which you can change your process and your people's culture and the processes that you've had years of experience to refine as well. I think the change here, Maker, is that for the last 20 years, we've had technology that has been sometimes a restraint rather than an enabler. So back in the 90s, you'd have a software company that would go out to, say, the director of radiology and say, hey, we'll do a bespoke custom workflow for you. And then jump forward a number of months later, they'll come back with a software solution, but it was often on custom code. And then that department would be belabored by legacy code. Jump forward to the 2000s, a lot of off-the-shelf app builders said, we'll get rid of that for you, and we'll do off-the-shelf pre-built workflows. That'll save you time and cost. The trouble at implementation is that you're then defending the pre-built workflow of the software, the technology, rather than perhaps evidence-based best practice. What we're saying is that the new wave of innovation needs to be built on technology that allows you to have Lego sets to build out bespoke workflows that suit your different teams and different requirements, but at the same time, give you the confidence that you can still do it fast, doing it at low cost. And I think this is the wave of innovation that will allow us to do the fail-fast method that you're talking about.
Thank you. Awesome. And for the audience, please continue to key in your questions. There are already quite a number coming in, and as our speakers share their unique experiences, there will be more. I'm sure about that. And without further ado, perhaps let's go on to Julian. Julian has a background in many things. So live chat service for a Gigya, one of the commercial companies. Medical 3D software engineering. You were an EDB investment analyst previously, and now, of course, what's been keeping you for the last couple of years has been busy, has been Jaga.me, a local startup company. And maybe share with us a bit more about what you do, what has inspired you in your journey.
Thanks, Shahan. So should I start a quick presentation or just share verbally?
It's up to you. You can be a good Singaporean and share according to our...
So I just want to clarify, since we are quite a diverse audience.
Yeah, whatever works. Yeah.
Okay, maybe I can just jump onto that and use the slides that I have as a platform.
Sure,
yeah?
absolutely. Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you.
So thanks everyone for giving me the opportunity to share about what our team at Jaga.me is doing. I think a bit to Prof's question about how not only did we start as a company, but also the journey to scale. I think we started from this very simple idea that one of the founding team members, Dr. Rina, shared with me over a discussion that all we need is a Jaga service to look after patients at home, and we won't see them so often in the hospital. Because I think as we sit here not too far from the Tan Tock Seng Hospital, we all recognize that capacity is a big challenge, and if we could stem the flow of patients and help the patients to be managed well at home, that would ultimately lead to better patient outcomes and also better usage of hospital resources that will ultimately lead to also, of course, better balance of what the healthcare workers experience right now. So Jaga.me comes from the word Jaga, and Jaga, for many people who may not be familiar, is just a Malay word that means look after or to guard. And that is practically our mission and what we want to focus on ensuring that patients get the best possible healthcare at home, and we enable that through a digital platform. So I think as Prof asked me, how did my very odd background come into this space, or at least how did I try to learn and adapt into this space. Because I came from a space where, like Mikey said, move fast and break things, right? And so when you have that kind of orientation to be trying to adapt and to move quickly, to use digital, I think as a layperson, had to be very conscious about how do you apply that into a patient care setting, how do you apply that to a patient care dynamic. And it took a lot of meeting of customers, going out the door to identify what are the needs they would have. And we really clustered the needs into these 4 categories. Seniors, right? They want to stay at home, they want to age well at home, they want to be well protected when they're living their best possible life. People with disabilities, I think definitely a similar group where mobility is concerned. Patients who are post-discharge and patients with chronic diseases. We realized that these are the 4 patient groups that had a strong need for effective and transparent, high-quality home health services that we could enable through a platform. So fast forward to today, since we started about 7 years ago, with over 50,000 patients we've served, about 500 healthcare professionals on the platform, and over 50 partners that we work with. And we believe that the thesis around this is that it could be done on a platform, right? That we could help create a system that could make this better for patients, better for families, better for the healthcare workers that are providing that care, and for the entire administration process. So that really started with us looking at the customer journey, like Mikey said, looking at what does the patient go through in that trajectory, leaving that hospital bed and getting back to his or her own bed at home. What do they need? And we realized that really there's often a medical incident, a fall, a heart attack or whatnot that really leads the patient to the hospital. And we wanted to make sure the patient we equip with, let's say, a simple app, right, that a family member could log in and enroll a patient, so that at the point of discharge, they could get the services that they needed and the patient support that they needed. And we spent a lot of time not only on thinking about what the patient and family would need, but what do the healthcare workers need as well. I think to build on what Brian mentioned, healthcare workers really need that adaptability and to have things on their fingertips. And to expect a healthcare worker to be lugging a 2-kilogram laptop around from home to home might be a little bit too much to ask nowadays. And we wanted to make sure that through their own phone, they could be able to access securely access patient information, patient histories, and put in notes, so that every healthcare worker that's making a visit to a patient's home becomes a sensor, right, to be able to pass that information on to the next healthcare professional. That has helped us a lot in terms of looking at improving patient satisfaction and quality of care. So ultimately, what the platform enables is a service, and these are the top 3 services that we basically render: house calls by nurses, doctors, as well as healthcare assistants. Extremely important for not just aging in place, but for load management in the hospital system, something that's very pertinent today, and definitely over the next 2 decades at least. We also been working very furiously on using our clinical skills, the clinical skills of our team, to ensure that therapies can be administered at home. That just ranges from your COVID vaccines. We've also done things like IV-based care for patients who were coming out of the hospital and need continuous antibiotics. And we've also been working on patient support, let's say telemedicine, let's say working with the Ministry of Health to ensure that COVID patients get support at home through a telemedical help rather than to go to a GP clinic. So we're really touching not just on ILTC or long-term care, but also primary care and post-secondary or post-tertiary care. So what we look at is in terms of how does this work with the system? Because it's great to kind of design in a silo, like, okay, I'm going to use the man on the street or woman on the street as a direct consumer. But we realized over time, I think to the original question about how do we evolve, I think we realized that any healthcare provider or any platform in health cannot exist as a silo. You cannot just design as if you're the only person playing with Lego blocks in the room. You need to think about who else is in the room that needs to hand a patient off to you, or you need to hand off a patient to. And I think that really informed our model, or that gave us certain inspiration of what we needed to do. How could we extend the reach of a doctor or a healthcare worker in the institution? How can we help to be a network they could leverage on, not only to assess the patient at home, but also to reach out, to be the caring hands, to be someone who could deliver medication with cold chain integrity, for example, to a patient at home. And we really developed that kind of a referral process where that kind of information can be rendered to the team on the ground, right? And also information can be gathered from that patient touch point. I think back of a project we did with Sing Health a couple of years ago where our nurses were equipped to essentially do a little battery of tests for homebound seniors. And I was thinking to myself when I saw some of these, the care that was being administered at home, it's basically having a primary health checkup in the comfort of their home. And nurses and even paraprofessionals could eventually take on the various tasks that help us essentially do more with the healthcare resources we have as a country. So a very quick couple of slides to talk about the evolution of care that we've been providing. I think one of the things that I will probably touch on later on is how we've eventually evolved from being very generalist to a bit more of a number of specialties. So for example, working with cancer patients with a pretty significant cancer provider in Singapore helped to expand the clinic chair capacity and help patients receive very satisfied care that they're very satisfied with, right? Super important for cancer patients because you're talking about immunocompromised folks, and we want to make sure they can have the best possible life at home. COVID vaccines, I think, is very clear, extremely important work that the Ministry of Health has done to bring homebound seniors with the right kind of immunity that they need. And I think on the later part of the last two slides here, I will just share real quickly that it's not just about jabbing people, it's not just about therapy, it's also about care. In order to build capacity in the system, everyone has a role to play. I mean, we're all family members, we're all caregivers of a sort, or we will be. So we are equipping families with abilities to care. We're providing them assistance also with caregivers in community networks, for example, like assisted living. So all in all, that really is the evolution in 5 minutes, and happy to take questions together. Thank you.
Thank you, Julian. And in case you are wondering why I'm not asking any questions yet, that's because I already sent them the questions before the session. So I am doing my job. Actually, I would like Mikey to ask a question to Julian. I noticed she had a very good question on hand.
Oh, just looking at my speaking
I hope that's
notes.
scripted.
I was curious, what has been your major pivots? Because as a startup, you launch something and then you learn, oh, that didn't work right, I need to change it. And I mean, 50,000 patients is really impressive, what you've reached already. So what has been the major pivot points?
I think every startup or corporate initiative that started needs to expect and be mentally prepared for pivots. It's adaptation. And for us, I think there are two main ones that we identified. I think the first one is starting out as a company without the luxury of coming out from the system, right? It's very important to build that credibility, and we started going direct to consumer, right? I think working with consumers and working with the institutions and the system is a very, very big difference, right? So I think for us, one of the big pivots was not just working with direct consumers, reaching them through, social media, etc. But also thinking about how do we work with partners, how do we work with the hospital system, how do we support them with an effective network of distributed care that they could actually dovetail back into their own care plans and continuity. That was quite a big pivot for us, because it's very different when you're just dealing with one stakeholder versus the family. Now you have to deal with another stakeholder, the family and the care team. So I think that really helped us to think more comprehensively about what needed to flow back to the hospitals, in what mode, and how do you kind of adapt to the behavior of both the families, because some families are not that attuned to technology. And some healthcare institutions have very, very strict IT policies, right? Only one dirty computer in the ward, for example, right?
Not mine, not mine.
Okay, I'm not going to say which ones, right? But I think we all know that there are some challenges in using technology. I think we just had to figure out how do we work with the stakeholders and their each respective constraints. And I think that's part of really of the evolution process. Yeah.
Any immediate comments to that?
Now, I'm really glad that you quickly realized you don't only have one customer segment, you have complete other customer segments as well, especially in the platform business model that you've created. I mean, and the key thing in a platform business model is indeed always both customer segments need to be treated equal, and you need to pay equal attention to both. And I think that was indeed the key insight there. So I'm glad to hear that.
Thank you, thank you. And of course, we stand between you and lunch, and that's about 15 minutes time. Still plenty of time for us to address some of the very interesting questions that have popped up on the Padlet for me, and really appreciate the engagement of the audience. I guess the first question, this is an interesting question, something my son typically asks me. How can we coach and coax a team member or boss to be less allergic to failure? I think perhaps we start with Mikey, because you did allude to some of that earlier about fail fast and learn from it. Can we just tell the boss, like, don't worry, we're just here to learn? What's your strategy for that?
I think you mentioned a word earlier, the de-risking, and I think that is a very important one here as well. And I mean, first of all, this boss needs to share the vision that indeed we want to do innovation. If that vision isn't there, it's not going to work. It really isn't. So it starts with the vision. Usually they have the vision. They want to achieve something, so that's the good part. But how do you get them to be the less allergic and the like that? And again, that is about setting clear stage gates. I mean, I had it as well. I said it was a company in Mexico actually, worked on a project. And I said to the boards, I said, I want to have them for 3 months. And it was a family-owned company. In general, they're a little even more risk-averse, I would say. I said, like, for 3 months, I want to have this team, and you're not going to get in touch with them. No contact. I'm going to give them a new email address and putting them in a different building, because otherwise everyone will come in and will interfere, will ask for reports as updates every week or every month, and that's just not going to work. And they were very uncomfortable, of course, with what I said, like, okay, let's set clear guidelines. What's the budget for these 3 months? So we're super clear on that. What needs to be the outcome of these 3 months? Let's also be clear of that. And what are the moments that, if it goes wrong, we will pull you in, right? If these things happen, trust us, we'll pull you in, because those are indeed important. So we reached agreement on that, and that's when they gave the team the freedom to go and to fail. Funny enough, within a month, we killed the whole project, so we didn't even need the 3 months, because we already learned enough that it wasn't going to work. Fine, right? But that really helped them to set, like, okay, these are KPIs, and we'll keep it limited. We're de-risking.
Thank you, awesome.
Sure.
I think that's, yes, go ahead,
Can I add a couple of points aligned to Micah as well? I think because we want to foster innovation here, and we've all got corporate masters and bosses to report to, part of the innovation piece is also building credibility and aligning with where our bosses are looking. I think the read that bends the easiest with the win often gets the most support, and so aligning with where we see our bosses are supporting the larger aims of the organization and aligning with that often helps for that initial innovation piece that then gives us the credibility to explore what we really want. One for you, one for me kind of deal has worked in the past.
Yeah, nice thinking about how to manage your boss, I guess. My CFO obviously will be very happy to hear about de-risking and how we try and manage the investments into innovation. I'd like to turn to Suen actually. Suen, you left the public health system because you wanted that latitude to move fast in your innovation, or at least that's what I think you did. Can you explain in the context of what we've just said about perhaps you could actually do the innovation within a very structured system like the public health system? So what advice would you give to the innovators out there who may want to succeed still within the public health system?
So I think the first thing is that if you can find a way to do it within your system, please do that, okay? Startup may sound sexy, but it's really, really tough, right? The highs are very high, the lows are very low. I'm not young anymore, I think. So I think I've been through a lot, but I think nothing like what I've been through in the last 3 years. And you definitely cannot do it alone. Like I said, I'm so proud of my team, but even with that, it's like really like brought us to like, places that we've never been to before. So it's tough, okay? So my first message is that if you can do it where you are, please find a way to do it. Happy to chat with you if it helps, and find your support network, mentorship, etc., to do that. Having said that, if despite all that you see no other way, and that's kind of where I guess we were or are kind of, I wouldn't say no other way, just that, like I said, we could be nimble in this regard. Then I think all the themes that everyone talked about, figure out what are your clear milestones, even with yourselves, even with our teams. We said, we're going to do this, but in 3 years, if we don't get to these milestones, then we are validating a hypothesis. We must be real with ourselves. Does it make sense or not? And then you talk about pivoting your business models. Now, out in the real world, when we're in a public system, to an extent, we make $5 look like $1. When you're in a startup world, you make 10 cents look like $500, right? And you stretch every bit you can out of it. At the same time, when you talk about pivoting, you really have to be able to find a viable business model. And it's not about profitability for profitability's sake. It's about sustainability and feasibility. If you want to scale and make an impact, those are necessary, right? Because unfortunately, we're not functioning as charities in that sense, right? There's a different mechanism for each one. But it's the biggest test, because if you truly have a solution that meets a big problem, and I think one of the needs that we have in healthcare is that there's a lot of opportunities for value creation. Lots and lots of untapped opportunities in value creation, because I think we can all identify that as care providers, perhaps, that there are so many things that play into the cost of care and play into the outcome that have nothing to do with the care itself, unfortunately, right? And so there are all these opportunities then to tighten that and to free up the care components and the people that can uniquely do what they can do in a manner that's a lot more efficient and effective. So I think I'll just reference back then, like what the user video showed earlier, and what we're effectively trying to do is scale deep expertise. So in healthcare, you need trust, because there's a lot of deep expertise that's needed from all of us, right? And it's not just doctors, we continuously learning from everyone else in our system, dietitians, fitness coaches, etc. How do we then bottle that up and scale that deep expertise? Because otherwise it's very expensive and not many people can access that holistic solution. Medical expertise. If medications are needed, what ones at the right time? Sometimes some medications are not subsidized. How do you make those potentially more accessible to more people? And oftentimes, like the person in the video, he needed to be on a little bit more for the first 3 to 6 months, and then he actually did achieve diabetes remission. And this video, I can't remember exactly when it was done, but his journey preceded that. But as of like this year and last year, diabetes remission is now officially defined by the American Diabetes Association. Just in the last 2 years, that is being free of medication. So the 12.9% is HbA1c, is now 5.9% HbA1c, 6.5 and above being diabetes, on no medications and maintain, right? So how do you then, that impact that's very, very deep in one individual, how do you scale that? And you can see that the solutions has a lot of customization components. So what we're trying to do is mass customize in some way. Last but not least, the most important thing is actually relationships, because human choices and behaviors are not rational for health. So even if you know what the right thing to do is, there's a big gap between knowing and doing for all of us. But what keeps people going sometimes is a trusted relationship. That's where coaches can come in. That's where technology can serve as useful touch points to help scale those relationships, right? So I think overall, it's really being in love, or really, really deep in your problem, and not being in love with your solution, because that can really trip you up.
Thank you, Suen, also for reminding me that the subject matter of today is scaling impact, and we do have an audience with some homework to do right at the end of this session, which is to pen down their takeaways from this session. So I want to draw us back a little bit. I think we've been talking a lot about how to get the innovations started, right? And obviously you can't scale something that hasn't even been started. And we were talking about how we can support innovation from the organization perspective, drawing some parallels and lessons from the startup ecosystem. And I think perhaps the way I see it is that there's some parallel between the multiple series funding that you get in the startup ecosystem vis-a-vis the type of grant funding that we provide in the public health system. So from a very small seed grant, you get larger grants and so on. And I think that's something for all of us to think about, even as we do our innovations. I think, Suen, you mentioned about sustainability. And so it's not just a flash in the pan, one project, I go out to the media and that's it, but really thinking about how to make that project last. Can I have the other question flashed up? For some reason, I think the system is telling me to stop very soon. But there was a question about scaling, about how do you scale something that keeps changing? And I want to ask this to Julian, because Julian obviously has gone through many years of trying to do Jagami. And I think Mikey alluded to some of that as well, about knowing to pivot and to respond. How do you scale something that it keeps changing?
That's an interesting question. I think it sounds at the outset relatively counterintuitive, but I think there's I think of a concept in engineering, which is flexible manufacturing, right? So it basically is a way to optimize both subscale with flexibility for that production line. So I think that there's something to offer there. There's basically there's few concepts that comes into play over here is that one needs to have the components for providing that service in as modularized a fashion as possible, and be able to kind of like customize that. It does have some juxtaposition against what Brian said, and I don't work for Salesforce, I promise you, but
we'll check on that later.
But I think that's one element, right? Being able to think about what are the components that I have, whether it's like services or teams that could adapt and be willing to adapt. I think there's an element of both the tools and also the culture, that people be willing. I think one of the things I reflect back on was that our team together, many of you guys here also, when COVID happened, we all had to reorganize a lot of things, right? So I think that's one of the very key stimuli of change, that we needed to use whatever components we had, still maintain the existing BAU, but really do something that was very, very different. So that means your support teams, your ops, your nurses, and our tech people all had to really adapt and move around in order, and that really took, in this case, we had the so-called a moral obligation of responding to a pandemic, but they also had the wherewithal and the knowledge, and I think in some cases the tools to be able to do so. But there's another element which is more on defining your customer or defining the audience, because I think there is a limit to this kind of musical chairs, right? There's a need to really think about what are the pockets of need in the roadmap. Have some sense of that, because if you're always looking at subscale, very micro, fragmented things, it can be really, really taxing. So I think that's also the counterweight to whatever is shared, but I hope that's helpful for Mr. or Miss Anonymous.
Thank you. Mikey? Yep.
Yeah, maybe to add to this, I think the focus when you want to implement something, the focus of innovation should not immediately be about like how big can it be. It should really again be what is the problem that you're solving. Because if you start off with, ooh, I need to reach 2 million people in Singapore, you get stuck. And I think if you really focus on, okay, what's the problem that I want to solve? Let's solve that the best way. And then you will see demand coming in and you will see it will create that scale. Sure, you should think as well, I mean, make some business model canvases. Yes. I always love doing that. And picture, is there even a potential future? Do that for 1 hour, but then focus on fix the problem at hand.
Excellent insights. Okay, I was going to ask each of the panelists for one key takeaway for all of us, but no, let's change that. Let's all of us put in our own takeaway from today's session, this morning's segment. And please use the QR code right here. Just take half a minute, really. Key in how would you scale the project that you had earlier thought about when we first started the whole session? I wish we had more time. All right, great. And I can already hear some stomachs grumbling. So without further ado, maybe let's very quickly just see for ourselves some evidence that we are all doing our homework here. Okay, great. Wow, fantastic. A very engaged audience. And I think this kind of brings us to the end of this session. And for those who need a bit more time to ruminate, I can't remember the project that you thought about, don't worry. There's still time during lunch. But before you go, ladies and gentlemen, please take note of the food collection point at level 2. And while you're there, please do visit our exhibition halls and showcase areas. You will find plenty of interesting innovations and technologies. There are going to be 4 open mic sessions, AI.sg, AIHealth.sg, Safe Space, HiCura, as well as Cell Wave Technology. And we would now like to invite our distinguished guests, partners, and speakers to follow our ushers to first leave the auditorium for the partners' lunch. And after that, for everybody else, please remember to return for more exciting conversations at 1:05. We are very strict about time, 1:05 p.m. Enjoy your lunch and we'll see you then. Thank you.